We're live.
We are live. All right. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Curious Leaders Path. We're going to talk about today, are you allergic to the word accountability? Yeah. So with me, of course, is Todd and Kat. And we've been, actually, what number is this? I keep on thinking, we got a number that, like, I don't know if it's like 15 or 12.
I think this one's 13. I think this one's
13. Ooh,
yeah.
Lucky number 13. Okay. So it's interesting. So that we, of course, come up with these particular topics based on, what we're sensing that's happening out there. And so one of the things that we started to talk about was this aspect of accountability and how we're seeing others wanting to be held accountable. But there's this distinction, right, of the word accountability. Like there's this distinction of, are we doing this are we being accountable from a perspective of we have to do it, or is it accountable that we want to do it, right? And what I start to think of, and what I have here, actually, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but it's called The Responsibility Process by Christopher Avery. So there's a good friend of ours, Mike Edwards, and I know Christopher as well, that does the responsibility process. So I wanted to kind of like define how he talks about responsibility and accountability. He doesn't use the word accountability, but he uses the word obligation. But so his definition of responsibility is that if we're in responsibility, we own our ability and power to create, choose, and attract. So to me, it's what I want to do, right? When I'm, that's what that is. But in obligation, we do what we have to instead of what we want to. Right. So the word accountability, so it got me really curious that these people want to be accountable. and I was very much like going, oh, and I know, Todd, you have an example of where someone and this is like, yeah, I want to be held accountable. Right. So tell us your example as to what you did.
Well, sure.
Or happened to you recently.
Yeah, it's actually, this is really serendipitous that it came up the way that it did. So I was TAing in one of the CTI core curriculum courses, and in those moments you get to work with the student coaches, and we had to come up with a topic, and one of the topics for me was like, I'm struggling to get my website launched finally, and this student in the coaching challenged me to launch the website in a specific timeline, and I kept, like, I've been putting it off because it's not what I like to do. It's not it's not something that I'm necessarily good at, but I just I didn't want to let him down because I was there and I said I would, and so I launched the website on the timeline that I said that I would in that moment, so that I wouldn't let this individual down.
And so that we can all check and make sure that you did it. What is the website name?
It's www.toddkargas.com. It's just my name and .com, and Nassif, if you're listening from Lebanon, thank you very much. You absolutely helped.
So this is interesting, right? So it's almost like you're dragging your feet to kind of like do it, right? And this is so many things that I have right now. I know I have a laundry list of things to do. And I know that when I do it with others, it gives me so much excitement and delight to kind of do. So I'm curious, now that it's done, like, what is the sense that you have now? Is it like, how do you feel now that it's done?
Well, what a great question. I'm proud of myself for doing it.
Awesome. Yes.
And it was a barrier to the next thing. And with this with this done, I now feel like there's like other things that can happen as a result, right? Like I can use it in marketing. I can use it. Exactly. So it kind of feels like a floodgate is open, and now, there's more that can happen. There's more choices, there's more things. And I'll hit another barrier eventually. Right. And when that happens, then, I'll look to another accountability partner, and hopefully it won't take me as long to figure it out next time.
So you actually went through that, although it was a hard, like it was sort of an awkward step that I don't really want to, but you went through it. It's like, I know it, this is interesting, right? It may not be what, like this is where Christopher's responsibility thing is. Like, I want to create this website, right? I know it's going to flood open things. I want to do it. But, there's something that drags us in that little thing, right? That kind of gets us across it, right? So, Kat, do you have any similar experiences to this as well? Like, what have you seen?
I'm not going to give examples, but I have many. And the reason I'm not going to give examples is because I don't want anybody who's listening to know that I do this, meaning specifically people I work with or clients. Yes, I definitely drag my feet on a few things. And usually there's a looming deadline and I'm, oh no, need to get that done. And then it's, there's nothing like urgency to motivate a person when you have to do something you're not that keen on doing. So it's usually not things, it's things I am accountable for, meaning I have to deliver them. Right. And there's most of the work that I do, I love doing it. So that it's never a problem for the majority of the work that I do to motivate myself. But there's some things that are usually very administrative where I'm just like, dragging my feet. And then it's, the deadline looming large that gets me going. And then the feeling that I have is relief. There's usually, and it's usually setting stuff up. It's usually sort of that planning. But it's the administrative part of planning. Right. I love planning. I love making sure, all the things are sort of lined up in the right way. But then the administration part of it, to lay it out, to describe it, whatever, that I have a hard time with. Because by then I'm not that interested anymore. I've figured it out. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what is it that you think, Kat, that causes people to not like, so they want to get this thing done, right? Yeah. They really do. Like, just like Todd's website, like my laundry list of things that I want to do for a Wicked Leader. I want a Wicked Leader program and I want it yesterday, right? And so, so what do you think are causing the barriers to kind of get so that they can do it on their own? Or why is it that people are looking for others to help them get over that line?
So I always use the term ready, willing, and able. If we're ready, to me is usually there's a pain that's motivating you. So for me, deadlines, on administrative things that I haven't done. So that's I get ready and, all of a sudden the urgency is there. The willing is, I'm usually willing because I usually enjoy what I do, work-wise. The willing is sort of being open to things. And Todd, I'm going to use your example. Even I just don't want to talk about my examples too much, just because I'm a little embarrassed. I'm a little embarrassed about them. Even though they're it's not a big deal. I just don't want to admit to them publicly. So I've had many experiences like procrastinating on setting up websites or other things, right? And I think part of it is you have to chunk things down. Like sometimes it just feels big, and there's going to be a lot of learning. And it's something that you don't really care to learn that much about. You're not that curious about it. So I think that's part of it. Sometimes you're not ready because there's other factors. And I'm using ready in a slightly different way now, but it's there's other things that you need to do in the background in order to really start becoming motivated to do something. And then the third piece, the able, is sometimes you don't have the competencies to do it yet. And that's the learning piece where you have to sort of really figure out how do you do it. And I think we always have to think about those three things because we have to have all three lined up in order for us to really do something wholeheartedly. Otherwise, we're just kind of being pushed through the process.
But it's interesting. So the willing, ready, and able is what you said, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing I get really curious about right now, and I don't know whether or not this is the reason why people are asking to be held more accountable than before. I'm wondering if it's the aspect of the fact that we are so distracted with so many things, right, in this world, that it's really hard for us to focus. So we choose, we may be able to do it, but it's that, like, maybe it's the willing aspect of it, right? That we're unable to focus enough to kind of do it. So by having another person, right, helping us, that it kind of like focuses us, and and then that willingness comes out a little bit more. But I'm not like that's like, I think there's something with our current environment that may be causing us to not not do what we want to do because of that focus. And that's why we are reaching out to having more people help us. I know this is a theory.
That's interesting because I think, yes, because there were many, many, many things, like going back to the website example, there's many, many, many things in my world that were more interesting to me than putting that together. Partly because also, launching the website meant, a whole bunch of other things needed to happen next. I was semi-prepared for that and semi-frightened by it. And I think part of it is not wanting to let someone down, but not just anyone. Like, there has to be an element of sort of community and mutual respect, and almost like a peer-to-peer sort of situation. Like, it can be done without attachment and without hierarchy, because I know that if I didn't do it, that like Nassif wasn't going to give me a call and say, "Hey Todd, what the hell? What's going on? How come you said the website would be done and now it's not?" But there was a genuine mutual respect and like, I'll say, affection in the way that accountability was offered rather than required. Right. And because it was offered, it was like a gift. And in that situation, that's why I'm saying, like, I don't want to let someone else down, but I don't mean it in like a people pleasing kind of way. I mean it more in an honoring the gift of accountability. I think that's what it is. That just popped into my head. I'm not sure.
I think there's a really important social element to everything that we do. We always, our personal identity, we don't have identities in a vacuum. We have identities in relationship to other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we absolutely desperately need community. We're biologically driven for that, because that's how we survive. Mm-hmm. So, Joanne, going back to your point where we're just very distracted, I think a lot of people used to work 9 to 5 or whatever hours in a very specific setting, a location, and there was just sort of a natural rhythm to their day. But now that we technically have more freedom, even for those people that don't necessarily have to go to the office anymore. So if you're working from home, it's really easy to get distracted. There's no natural rhythms, and if you don't really force yourself to get into that, it's hard to focus yourself. And I think a lot of people don't actually have the ability to focus very much. I'm finally just starting to get back into flow state again when I'm working, and it took me a long time to get back into it. But I think most people very rarely experience that because they don't train themselves for it and they don't set themselves up for it. So there's social elements, both positive and negative, that we want to identify with certain people. And we also want just feedback. Like, we just want to feel like, all of us are beyond having our parents or a teacher giving us the gold star, but we all kind of want some variation of that, right? We want the acknowledgement and the community and the identity. And we need the discipline in a positive sense. And I would add there's a third element to it as well, which is purpose. And I think a lot of people really don't have a strong enough sense of purpose in terms of what they do and why they do it. Todd, I know with you building your business, you're pretty clear what you want to build, but even though you're clear, it's still the beginning of a new business for you. Mm-hmm. And even though you've done some of this work before, there's a lot of choices you're going to have to make. So I think you've got a clear purpose, but the reality is that purpose can only evolve as you do the work. So, yeah. And so I assume part of your hesitation also was you're not quite sure exactly how this is going to serve. And what if you spend all this time and money building the website and then it doesn't quite, then you have to go back and change it when you change things. And like, there's lots of factors that are related to not having a clear enough purpose, not being able to have enough clear purpose, or not
Yep.
even knowing that you need to have a purpose.
And the perfectionism is strong with this one.
Well, because it represents you, right? As your personal identity.
Yep.
Oh, that's so interesting, right? Yeah, like the
Mhm.
personal identity, and I think that's, and to the question I was asking earlier, and I can feel this with some of the stuff that I do, is like, if I put this stake in the ground, that's my personal identity, that
Yeah.
people are going to now, oh my gosh, it's just like, they can fight against, right, or exclude me, or whatever the case would be, because I put that stake in the ground.
Yeah.
And so I may not want to because of that, right? But if I have someone else that I'm in conjunction with, right, then it's like, okay, maybe I'll try this out and then see what happens, right? So,
and you've got an ally, even if it fails.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that person was such a wonderful gift, right?
Yeah.
To support you, right? That, and you're hoping that you don't feel alone, right?
Right.
In that regard.
Yeah.
You're very, very right.
Yeah.
You're very, very right about that.
Yeah. Oh, well, Allison said your website looks great, Todd.
Thank you, Allison. You know what? I'm going to put that one up here. Thank you, Allison.
That's your gold star, Todd. You got your gold star.
Yeah, you got a gold star. Oh my God.
Oh, bless. That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Allison.
But it's a really interesting thing. Like,
oh no, did we lose? Let's give her a second and see if she comes back.
It's a very thoughtful look she's got.
It is. Okay. So this is the first time this has happened in our live broadcast, but that's okay. We'll keep going. It is interesting. I think that there's something I don't know exactly where Joanne was going to go with this, but there's something important in sort of the way that accountability mechanism worked for me, and there's something really beautiful in it. Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about is how, and it goes to the title that we chose, the allergic reaction to accountability is when we're forced to do it.
Exactly.
And one of the things that sort of in that model that I presented, where if we're forced to do something, if we're being forced to do something that we're not ready to do, that's the allergic reaction, right? Is that psychologically we haven't prepared ourselves. And usually I think it's, again, it goes back to ready, willing, or able. There's something missing if we're having that allergic reaction. So when we think about, when we have that allergic reaction, when somebody is pushing us to do something and we're pushing back, the questions I think we need to ask ourselves are what's missing? What part of the ready do we not have enough pain to motivate us? Are we not willing? Are we not open enough to the learning and open enough to the other things that we need to do? Or is it that we're missing something ability-wise and we're going to have to develop that and go through a painful process of learning things that we may not necessarily think we need?
Yeah.
So there's a real, that to me is where the curiosity comes in.
Yeah. Okay. Joanne's back. So let's bring her back into the stream. Hey,
Hello.
Joanne. Welcome back.
Yeah.
What did I miss?
We were just
we
were just talking about the allergic part.
Yeah, we started talking about the allergic part and that part of accountability where it's someone else. And Kat, you mentioned, like the question and the curiosity is around what's missing here that's not working. And it's funny that you mentioned that because, I've been held accountable by people where it wasn't a gift many, many times in many different iterations through my corporate careers. And it never occurred to me to ask what's missing. Instead, I would just respond sort of with a yuck and go, well, this doesn't jazz me. Like, it's just not, like, this isn't for me.
You're more mature than I am.
even if it's part of my job, like, it's just, I don't want to do this. And frankly, I left some jobs because of moments like that.
Well, and what comes up for me is I'm curious about the learning of it, right? So when we have that allergic reaction, right? And like, what is there that you don't like?
Right.
And so for me, it's always been like I've been put in a box or whatever, right? Told to
Mm-hmm.
be quiet, or told, whatever the case may be, or told to do a specific thing that I don't really agree with, right?
Right.
Or stand for. So, there could be learnings in anything that. So I'd be curious about the learnings of it, even things which I'm not accountable for, or I don't have allergic reaction for. I mean, and I
Right.
want to do it. I'm like, well, why is it I'm not doing it? Like, there's a curiosity in it,
Yeah.
right? And I
Mm-hmm.
love the aspect of what's missing, because there is something that's missing in both scenarios, right? And what is it that I want to do, or what's missing that can move me forward to where I want to go?
One of the best ways I found to move through that is
Yeah.
there's a few contracts I've had in the past where I was chief cook and bottle washer. So I was running whole programs, which basically meant I also needed to do the sweeping up kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few times where I was just like, that's, I just don't want to, I was fighting it the entire way. And finally, when I couldn't motivate myself, when I knew it had to get done and it was going to get done and I would do it. But the way that I finally motivated myself to get it done was to think, like, this is the last resort for me. How would I train somebody else to do this job? And when I looked at it from the perspective of how would I document what needs to happen? How would I develop metrics for it? And then I can hand it off to somebody else, even if I knew full well I wasn't going to be handing it off to anybody else. It just gave me that sense of, I just have to get through it. I can learn something. I can, empower myself that when we get to the point where we can hire somebody for this or bring somebody in for this, then I really can hand it off. That was my last resort.
That's great. I wish I could do that with the kitchen. It's the whole, I have to do the kitchen. I like it to be clean, but in order to do it, it's just where do you start, right? So I always do it in small little steps, but maybe I should be thinking of, how can I hand this over to someone else?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I hadn't even thought of it from that perspective, but yeah, listen, I have no problem cleaning the kitchen. I just hate, but I hate cleaning the bathroom. I wonder what that's like. So yeah, it's wow. I hadn't considered these particular aspects within, because when we started this conversation, Joanna, when you suggested it, the thing that immediately came to my head was like, I hate accountability. Like, I hate being held accountable, because it's always been within the context of obligation rather than there was a definitive lack of agency within it. And when that agency exists, and it doesn't even have to be for my own benefit. Like, our example was my website, and that's great, and that absolutely was for my benefit. But the example could be anything that's important to me, where I'm the one who has the agency within the subject.
Well,
that agency is so important. And I think, Viktor Frankl wrote about that in the Man's Search for Meaning. If he can find agency in concentration camps, I think we can find agency in the work that we're doing.
Exactly.
And it's we just have to look hard for it. Sometimes we have to look for, where do we have a choice?
Oh, I
love that too.
That's a really good example, Kat. And I just want to. That's a good reminder. Because really, agency exists where we want it to exist.
Yeah. And it may not always be the agency that we want. Going back to the examples that we had, is the work that we procrastinated on, we knew it had to get done. So the agency we had was not, do we do this task? The agency was, how do we do it? How do we approach it? What attitude do we choose to have towards it?
Yes.
How can we make it fun? How we can gamify it? How, like it's, so even in the worst scenarios in our lives, which are, we've got first world problems.
Exactly.
So even in our lives, we can pretty well make everything fun if we choose to, even the tasks we really don't want to do. Cleaning the bathroom, I hate it, but I've gamified it. Like I found,
but it's better than dirty bathroom too.
it's way better than a dirty bathroom. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my.
It's interesting when you were talking about agency, because then what came up for me was integrity, like my integrity, like of doing what I say I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
Type of thing. And am I
doing it well?
Up? And yeah, and am I standing up for that agency?
Yeah.
Right. Of who I am. Because that I can control, that I have a choice on, right?
Yeah.
That's
I love the word integrity in this context, because it is an integrity issue, right? Like it's
it's the other thing that's coming up to me when I think about that, and that context of accountability is, I know I'm late to the bandwagon here, but I just finished reading Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. And what I loved about it was that, she sort of goes through all of the 87 emotions, and in it, she talks about trust, and, trust is a feature that we all talk about, and accountability is one of the 7 features of trust, right? The others sort of, boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, meaning, can you keep a secret, essentially, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And when those things go together, like, I think that's the kind of accountability that we're talking about. That's, do I do the things that I say I'm going to do?
And the generosity piece just hit me, because it's like, are you doing it with joy?
Yeah.
Are you doing it, and generosity and joy are not the same word, but generosity there's a joyfulness in generosity, even when you don't want to be generous. Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
I also think we might have lost Joanne again.
Oh no.
Oh dear.
Well, it's time to wrap up anyways. So
yeah, it is. So what about final wisdom? What's your takeaway from this, Kat?
I really like how you just summed it up with Brene Brown's 7 points. Like, I think accountability is often a word that is forced on us, and whether we choose it or whether it's forced on us, we really have choices on how we respond. And there's nothing wrong with responding like a 6-year-old, stopping your feet and saying, I don't want to do it. Yep. But you don't stay there, right? Like, that's a perfectly acceptable emotion for 10 seconds or whatever length of time is necessary. And then you step up, you have integrity, you find a way to make it joyful, you find a way to get it done properly.
And maybe it's funny because, maybe when that 10-year-old pops up for however long he or she does, there's an opportunity also to give ourselves some grace. Yeah. Right. And to let that 10-year-old have their temporary tantrum and just let it flow through rather than make it part of us. Joanne's back again.
And I think the response, welcome back. I think that response of being graceful to ourselves when we're resisting it is, treat ourselves like the child that has the temper tantrum. Like, first you need to protect it and make sure it doesn't hurt itself or anybody else. Then you need to make sure it feels loved. So the safety first, then you need to make sure that they feel safe, and also that there's boundaries too. And that's sort of the conversation that you have with yourself, sort of when you feel safe, when you sort of address those initial emotions. And then what you do is then you have the accountability conversation with yourself and say, you have to do it. So how are we going to choose to approach this? Right. Exactly. And that's then how you can transition into, from the temper tantrum to the get it done.
Right. Exactly. Joanne.
Yeah, I think that I was pretty. What interests me, I love the aspect where we left it with agency, but there's something about me working with others that just feels so delightful, right? Yes. So it's this aspect of I can have that agency within myself for the integrity and all that, which I think is great. I also think I let myself down a lot too, which is good. But it's I think there's something that's there. It's just me and my wiring. But I do think that there's also something that's here. It is ask for help. So if you're unable to kind of like get to that point, it's good to kind of go out and say, okay, great, I need help. And maybe with that reaching out to someone else, you may feel that safety that you're talking about, Kat. and or encouragement or confidence or whatever it is that's needed to kind of get through whatever little hurdle. And then, just like the website thing, it's just like, yeah, that's a good thing to be able to do. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's important as well. Like, just to add on to what you were saying, Kat, like maybe that's another level that we can add into it.
Yeah. Accountability plus love is kind of magic.
I love it.
Plus curiosity.
Plus love is
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think those are the
Yeah, that's the
key
one.
things.
So we're at time. That was a conversation.
Thank you. Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you
Okay.
very, very much. And this is always a pleasure. And these warm my heart. They really do. So with that, let's sign off. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And we will see you next time
All right.
on the Curious Leader's Path.
Thank you. Bye.